Hello, one and all, and welcome to Office Hours, where we answer your tech and media production questions every single day. Alexander Knight is our reader today. What's our first question?
First question this morning is from James Foslane in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Apple released an extended journey through the set of Silo. Is this 3D render or actually shot? It would be great to break down just graphics alone.
And there's a link there to the YouTube of it if you want to watch, those of you who are seeing it. Alex Lindsay, what do you think? Can you tell?
Yeah, a lot of it is going to be 3D rendered. So, they're not going to – now, some of this stuff, anytime you see someone interacting directly with the set, it's probably real. This is trying to see if they're doing these walkthroughs. I mean, a lot of this, if they're interacting, if you see them walking down the stairs here and you see their reflections, it's going to be real. So if they're doing these – where they're doing the tours here, my guess is a lot of this is the real thing. But as soon as you see stuff that is higher than someone, so like all of this stuff down here is most likely real because people have to interact with it. They have to impact it. They're not usually going to build that out. I think that they're touring the sets. So what gets extended is typically, if I stop here, typically where you start to extend is up here and going up. So that's usually where if you don't see people interacting with something up there, that's where you would start to extend the sets. And you'll see that in I don't think this is Apple's. So but all of this stuff is probably set work. I don't think that any of this is probably, it's like skip through it. This is all probably actual sets. There's probably this is obviously a graphic. I think that they may have gone ahead and put this in. I'm not sure for 100% just because it would make people feel like they were there. But if you look at the wider shots, you'll see that these are all close-up shots. What they're not showing you is they're not showing you any of the spiral staircase and so on and so forth. Because if you go back to look at Tested is Adam Savage's show. If you look at Tested, he shows you, and you'll see all the wide shots that they're creating. So the pump, the spiral staircases, and you'll see there's just a section of the spiral staircase. They use the same section all the time, and then they extend it in different ways. But I think this tour here is most likely a just of the sets that they actually built to make this happen because it's too much work. People do it. I mean, people do effects where they make everything in front of green screen. But here's a couple problems. One is it's very hard on the actors. The actors will complain about it. When we worked on Star Wars, Ewan McGregor talked about it constantly, about how much he disliked doing things without being able to see where he was. He had no context. And secondly, that it is much harder to get all the hair right and everything else when you have to, every movement that they do has to be keyed. It's not a great experience. I know people have done it in 300 and many others, but it hasn't been successful generally.
Scott M. Davis.
A couple of things. A lot of it looks real, but a little bit of the rendering shows up. Some of the lights are replicated. I took a look at it, and I had to go back and forth a few times, and I could see the same light showing up a few different times and a few different places. So I'd say the bottom third, definitely real stuff. Top third, every now and then, it's like, oh, hey, wait, that light here is exactly the same and has the same physical and luminance characteristics as a light in another part. It took me a while to go back and forth to find the light in different parts of the facility, but it's just bits and pieces. So it looks like a lot of real with a bit of, hey, let's put some of the stuff that we render in.
It's like clip video from clip art days. Oh, they used it out of that thing, and you're now tuned to seeing, oh, I saw that.
But, I mean, it's well done. I mean, like, it's, yeah. I mean, think about stuff like what was done 20 years ago, Alex. Like stuff like this would have been like you would have definitely seen a line like real, fake. This is really well done.
Even stuff that's been done recently. The nice thing about watching the Apple events or the Apple shows in general is that it's very rare for me to see a set extension or CG that looks like they didn't spend enough money on it. When people say we didn't use any visual effects, like when people say that, for Tenet or Dune or whatever, that just means we spent enough money that you don't notice it. And so I think that's what Apple's done is generally produced effects that you just are actually invisible because you actually took the time and hired enough people and did what was necessary to make it pop out the other end properly. We know how to do that. We usually just make choices based on last minute changes, pushing the envelope of the deadlines, not spending enough money, and that's what's really, I think, hurt Marvel and others in the sense that they were rushing so much out in mass that a lot of the physics didn't work, the compositing didn't work, the 3D didn't work, and Apple's not doing that. So it's pretty successful and a great series. If you haven't watched Silo, it's
Do you think the sophistication of the audience has changed the attention to detail, Alex? I mean,
unfortunately not. I think we got more sophisticated and they didn't change it. I think that, I think that some people are spending a lot of money on it and some people aren't. There's some other, I'm not going to get into which platforms aren't doing very well, but some of them are doing what happens is that they have a certain budget, as you know, and then the director's eyes are bigger than the budget, but the director still wants to tell their story, and so they go down that path. I mean, even like you look at Megalopolis, there's a lot of CG in there that didn't work. It just didn't work at all, and that's a major feature film release. And we see that relatively often especially when we have to remember that I don't remember what the exact number is, but I think that Jurassic Park had 80 visual effects shots, or had 80 special effects or visual effects shots with CG, right? So there's 80 CG shots. By the time we did Star Wars, it was over 2,000. And that was the end of the 1990s. And now, a lot of times for these big shows, almost everything has a visual effects shot in it, and so it definitely makes them more expensive, but it also means it's very hard to pay attention as much attention to everything. When you build more physical sets, it's not that you're not using visual effects, it's that you're reducing the load on the visual effects teams, because not every shot needs rotoscoping, not every shot needs green screen, not every shot. So there's some shots that are relatively easy to extend or do, and then the team can pay more attention to those things. So it's not that there's no visual effects, but it's just less, and it's not every single shot, because when everything matters, then nothing does. And I think that's what you get into.
Yeah. Good discussion. Let's move to the next question.
This one's from Jeff Vealey in Henderson, Texas. When routing audio from a Rodecaster Pro to an ATEM Extreme for live streaming, is it best to route audio into the ATEM via quarter-inch outs on the Pro, or use the USB-C from our Pro straight into your computer?
Alexander Knight, do you want to dive into this?
Generally, recording audio separately is going to be better, although you'll have to sync it in post with your video later, so there's that annoyance. If I'm going to bring audio into an ATEM, I prefer that it's embedded into the camera. So what I did with my cameras is I've got XLR digital audio interface accessory from Panasonic here, and I run balanced line out XLR audio from my console into that accessory, which embeds it into the video, so it's aligned with the video as well. And then that goes over HDMI into the ATEM. You can do it. What I would suggest is get a box that would convert your +4 dBu professional audio line output into -10 dBV consumer grade audio, which is what those 3.5 millimeter jacks are taking. Make sure in your ATEM control software that those inputs are set to line level, because from the factory they are set to mic signal. So make sure you do that. There are a couple of boxes like the ART Clean Box Pro, which is inexpensive, under $100. And then on the higher end side, Radial makes a box called the J-ISO, which has Jensen transformers. It's a completely passive device. It's more money, but higher quality. Both will do the job, but I would definitely get a box that'll convert both the signal level voltage and the impedance properly.
Guy Cochran.
Yeah, Alexander stole my answer. There it is. Same thing. Nothing to add.
Okay. Hey, don't forget, if you wonder how we get our questions, the answer is you. Our viewers put the questions in. If you want to chat about the questions and talk, there's actually a community kind of that forms every day during the show. It's Mukana, and it's our Q&A system. You can go to officehours.global/join. We'll send you an email within a day or two, and once you've done that, you can ask, vote on, and discuss the show's questions in real time if you want to do that. That's officehours.global/join. All right, let's get to our next question.
Douglas Carmichael's asking, has anyone used live focus plugin tools like Audiostrom's Live Professor for live mixing?
Alexander, you want to come back in on this?
No, I don't know this particular software, but there's only two tried and true things that I would use out in the field, and that would be Waves plugins with a Waves DSP SoundGrid server or a Universal Audio Apollo interface, which has DSP with their plugins because they're ultra low latency and very, very stable. To use a purely software-based application, even on a fast computer, there's going to be a little more latency. And for me to trust it, I mean, you can test it, sure, test it and see how stable it is in a production, but that would make me nervous about using anything other than those because I don't know anybody out there in the field that's a front-of-house engineer that uses anything. If they are using software, it's pretty much Waves on a SoundGrid server.
Yeah, I'm speaking to you through a Apollo Solo right now, but I'm only running one plugin on it. It's a little background noise reduction just to knock down the room noise here. And the only thing I will say about that is that if you end up using a lot of plugins, you can get into a circumstance where you have to put a lot of memory into these things to run them in real time. That's their forte, is real-time processing, but there can be a cost to that. So just understand that. Next question.
Paul Valhus in Austin, Texas. Do you concur with this 54-minute MKBDHD team masterclass in how to make great videos?
Jeffrey Powers, start us off.
So I've been looking at some of this, and I haven't been able to get through the whole video, of course, but it looks like something that can be a great ground tool to see how you can improve on what you're doing. I mean, I have my own studio, and I build it through, and yeah, there's a lot of factors that are involved: the lighting, the cameras, the sound, having a microphone in the shot, having the microphone overhead. And with this video, they have Marcus has got a series of experts in there, which like one of them has a master's degree. I was watching, and they were talking about how the positioning, how the coloring, how everything works from there. With that said, it really depends because Marcus, it's not just Marcus when you create a video for your YouTube channel. It's a team that he has, and you can definitely get a team. I don't have that type of team. I don't have that type of money behind me. So having something like this as a tool is great. Just like any director that would go to a film festival to listen to other directors and how they think and how they look for when they put together movies is something that is always beneficial. So I'm definitely going to be bookmarking this and watching the whole 54 minutes to see if there's anything that I can add to my set, to my ideals when I'm not only shooting in studio, but also shooting out in the real world.
Alex Lindsay.
Yeah, when someone who's been doing this for 10 years or 15 years or what, I think at least 10 years that he's been doing this, and they are willing to have their whole team tell you how they approach it, you should watch. That's all I can say. So I haven't had time to take a look at this yet in detail. I skipped through it. It looks like it's got great. It looks like it's very they don't show what they're using. They kind of use graphics to kind of overlay that. So they're kind of just talking about the concepts, but it does give you a sense of what it takes to do videos the way Marques Brownlee does them. And so if you like his videos, then you should definitely watch how they make them.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. He can't argue with his success. He's done really well at this. Next question.
From David Brady in New York City, New York. Has anyone on the panel started to experiment with Bitfocus buttons? I'm having a hard time understanding its setup and use.
Unfortunately, it doesn't appear that anybody on this panel has a lot of direct experience with that. Alex, do you know a little bit about it?
I haven't worked with them yet. I've just been looking at what they're producing here. So this is buttons here, and I think that what they're trying to do is really focus buttons on the average broadcast designer, where Bitfocus Companion may be seen as a little complicated for them. You know, they're like, I just want to do the thing that I want to do. And I think that's where they're kind of leaning into is, how about we give you a bunch of presets? How about we give you a bunch of pieces, so that if you're not a Bitfocus Companion, if you didn't come out of that area, but you're coming out of broadcast, because obviously Companion has become a huge tool for broadcast, that I think that that's where this is aimed at, is taking the Bitfocus tools and making them more palatable for broadcast engineers.
And Guy Cochran's going to weigh in too. Guy?
Yeah, I started using it when it first came out, so I have it running on this PC with a Key Pro connected. And one of the things that I was trying to do was get it to lock out certain admin functions. So if I put this to where a user can walk up and be able to record, but they can't start the stream. So certain things you want at a granular level, and that's what the Buttons is allowing you to do. It is going to be a subscription-based thing where you have to pay more money as opposed to regular companion being free. So there's lots of other stuff that's coming down the pipe with NMOS and 2110 and routing and things like that. And so this generation you will have to pay for because it is a professional tool meant to go with the new rack unit. So when you're in a truck, you can do certain things like I was talking about lockout, and then you could still use a regular Stream Deck plugged into the front of that panel and be able to use Buttons to control access to certain functionality and have the whole thing switch around when certain people log in. So you could have an EIC that has different access to certain functions as opposed to just a regular user at that panel, or just completely lock it out so nobody can start a stream or push something to air that you don't want to go out.
Alex and Guy, thank you both. I had no idea this was out there, and now I'm a little bit better informed, so thank you. Next question.
Jeff Valian, Henderson, Texas. Last week, I asked how to extend battery life on a Litra STUDIO, as replacements don't seem to be available. Advice given was for the wrong model of light, battery Model LB90000-V1.2. Would you please revisit?
And Jeffrey Powers is going to try to help you out. Jeffrey?
Yeah, so I tried to do a quick search on that, the LB9000-V1.2. I couldn't come up with any answers to the basically. Litra made about 4 or 5 different lights before Logitech ended up purchasing the company. So it's the only thing that we can say at this point is if that's the actual battery model. Go to Logitech and ask them, see if they have any type of replacement batteries. But with the prices of these lights nowadays, it's becoming more of a situation where the lights are more throwaway than anything. And just getting a new replacement for there. You could try to, if you do a deep dive, you find something that's not going to be Logitech approved, you go to put that battery in, and then all of a sudden you run into new problems. And sometimes it's just better to move on and get the next light from Logitech or wherever.
Guy Cochran.
I would not throw this light away. It was an expensive light. I have this light. The battery did go out on it, and it does have a USB-C port, so that's how I've been driving that light. So it also becomes much lighter because that battery that comes with it is super heavy. So when I mount that thing and rig it up, I just run a very long. You can buy these USB-C extension cables. So I've got these really, really long ones that I can power down to a brick down, a vMount. So I have some Core Technologies batteries that have the USB-C out, but they're also vMount batteries. So I have a bunch of those, and that's how I drive the Litra STUDIO now. So it's a great light. It just they did not have a good battery vendor when that light shipped.
In the chat, there's a couple of people who suggested getting the battery pack rebuilt. I wonder if that's a cottage business somewhere. There's so many things that have proprietary batteries that, there's retail outlets like Batteries Plus. I don't think they do any rebuilding. They just have a lot of different kinds of inventory in those retail stores. But I'm surprised that nobody's online doing we will refresh your cells on something like this. Or maybe, as was just mentioned, everybody's considering even these expensive batteries a replace and toss. I hope not, because I agree some of them are very expensive. Next question.
Alex Lindsay from Novato, California says, I have a new device to show.
Ooh, yes, please. What do you got for us, Alex?
All right. So one of the things that we're constantly trying to figure out is how to manage sync. So audio sync with your video. And so I was talking to somebody who does a lot of this, and they brought up a device that I had not used before. I'd heard about it, and I was like, how much is that device? Like, is it something that we should go ahead and get? So I went and bought it for what I'm doing. I'm doing a lot of stuff where I'm doing work in large screens. So it's not something like a Matchbox doesn't help me because I don't need to measure the offset as it leaves something. I need to measure it on the screen with the speakers. So this is the thing that I'm playing with here, and this is from Harkwood Services. It's called a Sync 1.2. So it's a pretty simple looking box. It's just like a little box here like this, and you basically play a video into your system. So you play this video here, and there's lots of versions of this video, that different frame rates, and that's all it does. So it does that, and it's this. So you play that into your system from the head end, and you point this at the screen, and it just tells you how many milliseconds that blink was from the audio. So it kind of gives you a sense of it. Now it doesn't fix my problem because my venue is large enough that I have to walk around. So it'll also remember the average, an average of so I'll walk around the room, because remember, we're losing about a millisecond a foot. So if you're 80 feet back, you're already 80 milliseconds off. So it's a matter of figuring out where you're going to sync to. But for us to be able to do something like that, so far it has been a little hit and miss. Like it's one of those things that it sometimes is giving me what appears to be accurate readings, and then sometimes it's giving me just wild readings. And so I haven't quite figured that out yet. I have only had it for a day. But I've talked to other people, and they said, yeah, that's what it does. So if it doesn't get the audio very well, it gives you a really bad number, so you know that it's a little off. But we're going to test it more. I'll give an update down the road. So we'll play with it a little bit more. One of the things that I didn't do today, but what I'm hoping to do, is I sent the video out to all the panelists. And one of the things that we're going to try to do is get to a point where they pick up their phone or whatever, put it up to the screen and do it, and see if we can do a thing where we kind of sync the panelists to their, we can check their sync through an iPad or something like that that's outputting it. So we're going to test that too, to see if it's an easy way for us to kind of sync everybody up. Now I have another set of tools that I'm working on that, I think that these guys are using a piece of hardware. I do think that today we can use a phone to do something similar. So it's just a matter of, I got a couple ideas related to that. So we'll see how that goes.
Alex, it sounds fascinating. When you go out to audit these theaters, so where do you sit, or where do you set the sync if there's this much delay?
I mean, the average is really, you sit in the best seats and you tune for the best seats. I mean, that's typically what I end up doing is I tune everything for the best seats, and then because that's the average, right? That's the
right. Is that like 1/3 of the way up a stadium, or
it's
something
about
like
halfway
that?
up. Typically the way my calculation, based on conversations I had with folks years ago, is I'll look at the number of speakers up the side of the wall, and I will, if it's an even set of speakers, I split the middle. If it's an odd number, I sit right on the row that has the middle speaker. And generally, you're pretty close to where they've tuned the room, and so that's the optimum. And there are solid 12 seats in a theater that I'm willing to sit in. Like, like if there's like this little box, if you think about a theater, there's a little box in the center that is 4 seats wide and 3 rows, forward and back. And when I go to book a seat, I'm going to sit in one of those seats, or I'm not going to go that night. So like it's, like I'm not going to pay and go and take time out of my day and buy popcorn and do all the other things. I'm not going to do that if I'm not sitting in a seat that's worth watching the movie. So I don't like to watch things off angle. I don't like to watch things looking up. Sometimes in an IMAX theater, I'll sit a little further back, because depending on the size of the screen, sitting in the middle is not necessarily the optimum place for an IMAX theater. You usually want to pull back a little bit to check that. So
I'm always fascinated. I go to a theater and there's like 30 people in a theater that holds 200, and there are always people who sit in like the last 5 rows, and there are always people who sit what I consider way too close. And
I think they just had a poor upbringing. I mean, especially when they sit up front, I'm like, what are you doing? Like, I mean, at the back, I kind of get. There's some people who at the very back, there's some. I can see why you might want to have some frame around what you're looking at. The problem is, if you sit too far back, in most theaters, other than maybe a Dolby theater, you're going to not hear the surround rears. You know, they're going to be off to the side, and you're not going to really properly hear them. So you can't, if you get within about 4 rows of the back, you have a hard time hearing some of the surrounds at an average theater because most theaters don't have speakers directly across the back plane. So that's the challenge. So you usually want to move a little bit forward so you can hear that. And then, and too far up, I mean, it just doesn't look dimensional anymore. So that's the problem. Mickey said, by the way, I would measure and set sync prior to the CP, as the CP would have time alignment delays as well. Yeah, and I'm still going to be using matchboxes for what I'm doing to measure all the way up to the electrical handoff. But I still need to be in a theater to make sure that I'm getting what I expect. But yeah, you want to be able to have something where you can figure out where the pipeline is getting delayed. So that's why you want to figure that out. And again, you can use something like a matchbox because it's really fast, but you can also just simply record outputs from different locations and look at the sync. And you can even use this video to do that because this will just do just play it out. But remember that when you do sync tests, the mistake most people make is they only do play out. They only play this video out. You have to play the video out. First, you have to make sure that your sync's correct to the screen at the originating location. But then you have to, that's why the iPad is so powerful for Matchbox, even if you don't use Matchbox. But having an iPad generated, because the audio and the video are generally synced very well on an iPad or a laptop. As soon as you move away from those, the sync between the screen and the audio is unknown. Like, you don't know what the sync of your audio screen is compared to your computer as soon as they're not part of the electrical connection. And even then, I was measuring my iPad. It consistently measures my iPad as the video being 15 milliseconds ahead of the audio. Like, it just everything I look at, it wants to say that's, and it could be the case. And because if you're ever going to cheat audio, you always cheat with the video a little ahead of the audio, because we naturally as human beings are used to, remember it's a millisecond a foot. So if someone's 20 feet away from you talking to you, they're actually 20 milliseconds out of sync. Your brain just kind of immediately adjusts for it. So we can adjust for video being ahead of audio. We just don't adjust very well for audio being in front of video, because the only time that happens is when we eat something poisonous. so the only time the audio gets in front of the video for a million years, until we had these tools, until we had all these video cameras and everything else, the only time audio got in front of video is when something horrible had happened. So we can usually handle. So if you're always gonna lean, you're gonna lean a little towards the video being ahead of the audio as opposed to behind it.
I mentioned earlier that your questions drive the show. Also, if you want a simpler and quicker way to get things in, I tossed up a QR code here that heads you to askofficehours.global, and you can literally type that into your web browser. So if you're ever suddenly hit by inspiration, say, there's a question and I really want to put it into the show queue, and this can happen anytime, day or night, just type in askofficehours.global, and or you can scan the QR code up there, take a copy of it, and that gets you into the quick system. They'll vet the thing in either that day or maybe the next day if you come in late. That'll be part of our question queue. So that's how you kind of interact with the show. All right, next question.
From the QR code, Joel Solomon in Mumbai, India. Thoughts on the new version of vMix? Anyone tested the beta?
Jeffrey Powers, help us out.
Well, I actually installed vMix 28 last night. I was really reluctant to, because of the fact that you had to use one of your licenses to actually do that. Sorry about that. But some of the features I really like. I want to show you one of them really quick, and that is the telestrator. And of course, I just realized that did that as I don't want it to happen. But the telestrator is a really nice little feature that you can bring in and of course telestrate. I have it on the same computer, which is why it was doing that layered frame thing. Of course, video feedback. Yeah. So you'd want to have it on an external device like an iPad or Android tablet. You basically call it up as a web page, and then you have the features to do some of the drawing on there. So that's one of the features that I was playing with the other day, and of course there's many other features. The one thing I did notice once vMix 28 came up, besides the fact that I had to re-up my license, was I felt that the video was a little bit crisper than with 27. I'd have to go back to 27 to double check, but I really liked how it looked on screen just within the interface. So I'm really excited to move with some of these features. And I remember a couple questions from last week, and I'm going to be definitely researching them to make sure that to try and answer them if they ever get asked again.
Next question.
Paul Valhus in Austin, Texas. For video, I got the best low-cost all-around APS-C lens for my Sony ZV-E10, the TAMRON 17 to 70 millimeter f2.8. Agree.
Alexander, what do you think?
Well, it sounds like you already made your decision, Paul. It sounds like you really like it. Tamron makes excellent lenses. In fact, from what I understand, I know Jared Polin has reported that Canon has been white labeling some Tamron lenses, so they've been manufacturing lenses for other people. I don't know about the autofocus. I don't know if you've had a chance to test that. I'd be curious to see how good the autofocus is. But in general, there are a lot worse lenses out there, and Tamron makes really good stuff. So it sounds like that is a good one. I don't know how much you paid for it, but they're definitely not on the cheapest end, but they're also not, at the most insane end of the price scale as well.
Alex Lindsay?
Yeah, it also depends on what you're planning to do with it. So I've definitely decided for webcams, I figure out what my lens should be, and then I buy one that's prime lens. This is some kind of fixed lens that's going to be what it is. So I have a 35 on this one. I decided this is the frame. So if I want to change the frame, I'm going to move back or move the camera back, but that's the frame I have. Now, when I'm out there shooting, a lot of times I'm using a 24 to 70 Canon, because most of my shooting cameras are Canon mounts. But for the Sonys, I'm using something I'm usually using some of the G series from the Sonys. Tamron doesn't necessarily make the best glass, but if you're getting the result that you're looking for, then it's the best camera, best deal that you can get. We find that it's where you want to look at it is when you open a Tamron camera all the way up to 2.8, just see how sharp it is. Here's where Tamron tends to not do as well. There tends to be some vignetting on the outer edges. And there tends to be a softness that happens starting in the low threes, so in the mid threes, 3.5 to 2.8, you're going to start to see what's in the center, in my experience, start to run a little bit less focused than what you had at 5.6. And all lenses do that. It's how quickly do they fall off. And Tamron's, because the glass isn't quite as high quality, will tend to fall off faster. You may find that your autofocus isn't quite as fast as some of the other ones as well. So those are the things to kind of look at there. But it's a good value if it's doing what you need it to do.
Nigel Dessau.
Yeah, I was going to also talk about what's best for you. So I'm a big fan of Sigma. So this is my Sigma 35 lens. In the center of everything it's great. And it's absolutely good enough for me. I wouldn't necessarily use it for producing billboards or fashion-ready photography. But I think for most uses, Sigma, Tamron, most of the compatible lenses do a great job. And they are significantly cheaper if you're not going to be able to get a huge amount of work to pay for that lens.
Makes sense. Next question.
Dean J. Anthony in Skokie, Illinois from the QR code is asking, we are looking to finance our own line of gravies based around the 14 most important things. As media professionals, how would you do this? How would you make the money and promote this, and who with? Do we need celebrity?
Alex, is your mouth watering, and do you want to dive in on gravies?
I just want to know what the 14 most important things are.
Yeah.
So I think that your first step is to make a video about what are the 14 most important things. In fact, there might be 14 videos there. This is the most important thing. I'm not kidding, by the way. I'm not being facetious. If you want to launch something, do 14 videos about each thing and about what makes it important, where it comes from, the people who picked it, like that, all that stuff. And you might end up with a following that is now ready to do it. In general, you're going to launch some kind of product like this, you are going to need to build up a following doing something that's at least tangentially related to what you're going to sell, or you're going to need to put out the product and find distribution for it. You're probably not going to be able to just launch it with videos to make that actually happen, about the product. The mistake I think people make oftentimes is they make only videos about their product, as opposed to videos that serve the market that their product serves. Like, that's what you're trying to figure out. So your market is most likely barbecue and a couple other things. And so how do you do that? And oh, by the way, we use this gravy, but you're going to have to figure out that I don't know if you need a celebrity, but you definitely need at least a social media, an influencer that is doing something that's related to that, as I'd probably partner with an influencer that's got a fair amount of juice, so to speak, and figure out how you work with them to make that happen. But I think then you'd be financing them to do it. And a good example, not the one that you should probably use for this, but Leo's son, Hank, does Salt Hank is what he did. But he started doing TikTok. He did not talk about salt. He talked about cooking. And Hank did the cooking. I keep wanting to call him Henry because I know him as Henry because he was Henry before he was Hank. But he did that and had hundreds of thousands of followers. Ended up on morning television. Now has a big YouTube channel. Launched his own line of salts and has made some money with that. Now he's launching his own restaurant in New York based on all of that. But all that started with making videos. But he was at an age group where he understands his market. And he did it over years. It's not like you're going to launch something, unless you're Procter and Gamble or something that has millions and millions of dollars. Like, we're going to spend $50 million launching this thing. You're going to have to think about how you're going to get influencers, and you're going to have to think about using time. But I'm very curious. What are the 14? I don't know what they are.
I know, Jeffrey Powers.
Yeah, influencers are the way that I would go because there's so many out there, and you have different levels of influencers. You have the people that have like hundreds of thousands of subscribers, and then people that have, like myself, that are in that mid-range that still have a lot of views on there. So basically, what you would do is you would contact them, then you would send them some of the gravies, probably all 14. If you go for a specific niche, that would be foodie YouTubers or TikTokers or anything like that. And then you want to also make sure that that's their niche, because you have foodies, and then you have people that make cakes, and people that make desserts, and people that make, and so gravies don't really fit into that specific niche. But you find the right people that do the things that'll bring it in. Have them give an honest review. Very important, because you don't want somebody that's just getting free samples and saying, "Yeah, this is the greatest thing in the world." You want them to, and I would specifically in the communication say, I want you to give your most honest review, even if it is negative. And I know that sounds very distressing, but it also gives people a really good idea. And some people, they'll say, maybe you don't find that gravy interesting, but I might, and I'll give it a try. Another thing you can do is, you could definitely send these samples out to other people, like celebrities, if you really want a celebrity to be part of it. But if you're looking on the celebrity level, one, your gravies might just get thrown in the trash if you're just doing cold calls. And two, if they come back, they might want to do a deal that is probably past your price range. Either you pay once, cry once, or you move on from there. So yeah, the influencers are probably going to give you a better option on there. And one last thing is, you could also try it if you're on Amazon. Go to the Amazon influencers and see if they'll do it. And because those they're not going to be the highest views, but they're going to get your foot in the door so you can go to the next level. So always think about ramping up from there. Unless you have the money to do it, then buy once, cry once.
The chat has been fun. Nigel wondered, are there gravy influences? And Alexander replied with, gravy sells itself. It doesn't need influencers. I will say, I'm going to do this really quickly. The best meal I ever had in my life was at a restaurant called Tony Angelo's in New Orleans before the flood, before Katrina took it out. And our waiter, who was a consummate pro and the most charming man I have ever had wait a table for me, in the middle of his pitch as to what the specials were today, he said, and it comes in a gravy, what y'all call sauce, and moved on. And it just reminds me that the food is its own gigantic universe, and I love all the people who work in it. So I wish you well with this. I hope you come up with recipes that smoke everybody else, because that's how things move forward. Next question.
Joe G. Gonzalez III in Washington, D.C. Last night, a well-known person in leadership spoke about remote workers, stating most of the time they are not working. They are not very productive, end quote. Do you think large companies feel the same and will call people back into the office?
Scott M. Davis is going to start us off here. Scott?
Sure. So I've been working from home for a decade, and I know that people got more out of me when I didn't have to commute than when I had to drive to the office. But that's going to vary based on the individual. I've got really good friends of mine who've tried to work from home and it didn't work for them, and they've gone back to the office. It's going to vary based on the person. I think what we're running into here is a lot of campaigning. Large companies sometimes have large leaseholds on buildings, and they spend a lot of money in those leases, or they own a lot of property, and they'd like to get their value worth it, and they want to put bums in seats in those buildings. There's certain businesses which I think will see value in people being in that office. I've worked remotely for a decade. I fly a lot. I spend a lot of time on teleconference. I probably put in 10, 12-hour days. Not a big deal. Other people are less productive. I think there's a lot of politicking going on in this. I think it's up to us as individual professionals to ensure that we do things well and present ourselves appropriately. And you as an individual have to make a really good decision what's good for you and play by the rules to make sure that you're valuable to whoever is writing that check, to make sure that you're doing a good job.
Nigel DeSalle.
So I've managed teams of 5 to 500, and the 500, lots of them were remote. So this may be an unpopular view, but I'm going to tell you really honestly what I think. Here's what I honestly think. It works for some people, and it doesn't work for others. There are some people who are very effective to work from home, and there are some people who cheat, okay? And it's a fact of life, and they've reorganized their work around other things, and they tell you that they're working late at night, and they're not. Now, is that 5%? Is it 10%? Is it 50%? I don't know. But I'll tell you two other things. Number one, this is not an employee problem. This is a management problem. If you don't set your people good objectives, you give them the opportunity not to do the work. Second thing is, I'll tell you, it sort of follows on slightly from the point Scott was making. There's a very famous company that had a headquarters in Florida that got destroyed in a hurricane. So they sent all 500 people to work from home. What they discovered a year later was they didn't need to build a building for 500 people, because some percentage of those people were keeping the other percentage of those people busy. And so what I think you're going to have to accept, that the work from home movement has shone for a lot of companies a spotlight on the inefficiencies of the way they are working. And they are willing to lose good employees. So I know we're about to hear a story about good people who are leaving. They will lose good employees because they will long-term replacement to get rid of 10 or 15% of the workforce. And I think the US government is trying to do the same thing. At the end of the day, Twitter got rid of 75% of their people. You could say, well, it was a disaster, it was terrible. They got rid of 75% of the people and they got going. That is a message that everybody has looked at. They're not going to get rid of 75%. They hope not to. But everybody is going to slim down their team. And we haven't even started talking about the effects of AI.
Alex Lindsay.
Yeah, I think a lot of companies are looking at AI as an opportunity to this is a way, it's a safe way to kind of get rid of lots of employees, is to tell them they all have to come back to work and force them to leave. Laying people off is bad press. And so it's much better to say you all have to come back into the office and get a certain level of loss through that process. I do think that for the folks that are effective at home, I think that they are effective. They are so much more effective that they make up for a lot of the folks so we hear horror stories about people not being very effective, but I think the folks that work at home that are effective, I've been, working at home for a long time now, there's a couple things that I do think you have to do, which is that I have an office in my house. I do not work on my on my dining room table. I don't think you can be effective if you don't, as someone working from home, I don't think you're effective if you don't have a space to work in. Like I have a place that I go, so I have it's just that my commute is only 10 feet, but I'm still commuting into a space that is completely my office. Where I'm sitting right now is where my office is. This is where I work. When I walk out of here, I might take phone calls, but that's about it. And so I don't do any work outside of this office. And so I think that in that way, mentally, I know that I'm in and out of the space that I'm getting things done. So I think that's a key piece to it. You do have to there's a lot more meetings because you're not in the same place. You can't just walk over and have those things. But I will say that I find that to be much more. It's easier for me to work on things because I can control when people are talking to me. People think that something's a 5-minute conversation, but for many people, if you stir something up with someone, that's a 1 hour or 2 hour conversation that only took you 5 minutes, as the manager. But that person now has been derailed from what they were working on before, and that happens in offices all day. I've been a gray badge, a red badge, a blue badge, all yellow badge, orange badge in many of the FANG companies, or what they call the Magnificent Seven companies now. And it's just a constant droning of distraction. Like everybody's got something that they're going to ask, and everyone's going to talk about something, and there's no structure to it. And you're all in these, part of the reason that employees don't want to come back in is that they have to drive all this way, and then they get, herded in like cattle. Into these shared spaces. If they took the employees that wanted to be back there and gave them their own offices, a lot of them would go back in. A lot of them would be they're not. It's not that they don't want to go back to the office. They don't want to go back to the environment that they're in. That they can't think. That they have to wear headphones all the time. That they have to do all these other things. And the people who say that they have to come back in, of course, are 10 minutes from their office. These are people who can afford to live 10 minutes from where the office is, where other people are driving an hour and a half. So you're just throwing away an hour and a half or 2 hours of their life. And if you require, and this is going to come up, people already talking about it. If you're requiring people to come back to work and they live 2 hours away, some people are starting to talk about needing to be compensated for that, the travel time. They're talking about it. I'm not saying but that's the next thing. And because a lot of them who are working at home are now talking about the fact that they consider what's happening now as a pay cut. And again, a lot of them, and again, as Nigel said, this works for some people, it doesn't work for others. Some people will capitulate and go back in. A huge chunk of folks are gonna leave. The companies startups and smaller companies and highly virtual companies are on CNBC every day talking about it. They love this. They're like, if you think all your employees should come into the office, tell them that right now. We're ready to hire them. And they're on, but I see them on the business things all the time because I get the highlights for those. And they're saying, if you think that this is a good idea, then you should do it because we're here, we're on LinkedIn. We're ready to hire all the people that leave your business.
This is generating a lot of chat, so let's try to be concise. Jeffrey Powers, dive in.
Yeah, before COVID, before all this happened, I remember the saying, and I might be wrong on the number, but the average person does about 30 minutes worth of work or something like that in the office. And that's one of the things that a lot of people will bring up. I'll go on Nigel's idea of management. You want a manager that actually will be involved in the people without doing the micromanaging. And the manager can't forget the person because you don't see their face every day. You don't see their face in the hall. You don't see their face anywhere. So it's easy to forget somebody. And then all of a sudden, 2-3 weeks later, you go, well, I haven't checked up on this person, so I should really do that. It's at work from home. I've done it for 17 years. You got to be very self-motivated. As Alex said, you have to have that separate space. I would also suggest having a buddy program because all of a sudden other things come into play, like depression, because now you're all alone in a space. And I've gone through this before where I feel, just completely frazzled to the point where I just want to go crawl in my bed and sleep for a few hours, but I don't. So having a buddy program, having somebody somebody that's constantly going back and forth and talking with you is going to definitely help, so you can keep the conversation going, so you don't feel alone, so you don't get depressed. And of course, talking to your doctor regularly is a very important part of that too.
Alexander Knight.
So I worked in tech for about 15 years and worked in various size teams, and I can tell you from what I've witnessed is that there is no way that anybody has, if you subtract an hour of lunch, let's say 7 hours, there's no way that anyone does 7 hours of pure productivity. So the reality is, whether you're working at home or whether you're working in an office, these are just different environments. Everybody is different. And for the most part, I don't see people doing more than about 5 hours. You're lucky if you get that of pure productivity. And it varies from person to person. So there's a bigger discussion to be had, which I'm not going to get into, but I personally don't believe in the 8-hour workday. I don't think it works for a lot of people.
Scott M. Davis, you want to come back in?
Really quickly, Alex was talking about how you have to build a space. When you build that space inside your home to work, you also have to build that space within anybody who lives there. For the first couple of years that I worked from home, my family thought, great, Dad's home. Cool. Hey, we can just go deal with Dad. It's like, no, I'm working. And you have to build that wall around you to have that workspace. So my workspace is full of everything I need. It also has a very solid door. And a minute ago, somebody just knocked on it, and the rules have to be set to say, hey, if that door gets knocked on, I don't answer. You don't open it, because I am working.
Absolutely. I will say, it's not a pushback, because I actually agree with everything Alex said about that. But I did notice that I actually compartmentalized. For years, I wrote a column for a magazine, and I would leave my home office and I would go to a coffee shop specifically to do that task. And I knew the seat I wanted, and I got it every day, and the waitresses knew me. And I wanted to shut myself off from everything, go mobile. I was writing, so I was able to do it with just my laptop. I didn't need the rest of my infrastructure. That was incredibly productive for me. I had a space to do this task. I went to it and I did it. It also informed me that I could work mobily if I was writing and if I didn't need the rest of the infrastructure. So sometimes task-based things can be out of your home office and still be incredibly productive. Just making a note about that. Next question.
From the QR code, Vic Sinise in Lowell, Indiana. I am providing AV for a medical conference, and I want to bring in a remote speaker via cell phone for Q&A. What is the best way to interface with my audio mixer?
Alex Lindsay.
Yeah, there's a couple different ones. The leader in this area, or has been for a long time, has been JK Audio. So these guys have a lot of different tools for bringing your there's many products that they have that are related. So you just kind of have to go through and look at them. But these are usually hybrids are what you may be looking for here, but these are designed around it, and they have a lot of circuitry there so that you can take cell calls or POTS line calls from the POTS lines. Plain old telephone system are hard to find now. So in most places, but those are and oftentimes what we've done is used. I know, what is it? And I can't think of it right now. Phone Genie or whatever we've used that hooks to IP and then delivers basically a POTS line into one of these, and then we can connect it to anything. Another way to go is using something like this. This is this is from Audinate. This is the Bluetooth to Dante. So basically, you can take your Bluetooth phone, connect it to this, and it gets very high quality audio in and out, and it just delivers it to an audio pipeline. So it depends on what your audio mixer does, but if you want to just take a phone call and deliver it to it, I have found it to be a little quirky, so it hasn't worked perfectly in that area. James Haldane said also that you can have them call into a Zoom meeting, and we've done that. We've used GoToMeeting, Zoom, etc. There's a phone line for someone to call in. You'll get higher quality audio if they use the app. So if they jump into the Zoom app on their phone and they talk, then you have a laptop that is just, that's there connected to the rest of your system, and you can deliver their audio from there. So that's another way to do it, and we've used that fairly often as well.
Harshid.
I tend to use this little gadget here. It's pretty much what I think you mentioned with the JK Audio. It's a DI Switchcraft, I think, is the brand of this one. So XLR on one end, a 3.5 millimeter on the other, and then it has on the end of the 3.5 a USB-C dongle. So I could pretty much bring in any kind of audio. So let's just say if you were on a phone call and you just needed something to make it work, you'll have pretty decent audio that goes into your interface, and just make sure you set the gain all the way high on the DI box, and then mark your interface to make sure you don't blow out anybody.
Next question.
Talal Lopez Waterman in Madison, Wisconsin. As far as LED architectural lighting and cameras go, what metric do you look for in fixtures that could end up with shutter flicker?
Guy Cochran.
Well, you're probably not going to see it in the specifications because a lot of manufacturers just don't reveal that information. It's not a standard. So it's PWM, pulse width modulation. The best thing to do is just get a sample unit. Usually these manufacturers will have distributors, and you can get a loaner. The other important side of this is to look at the camera end, because choosing the camera that doesn't just lock you into a certain hard shutter like 1/50th, 1/60th, etc. Some of the higher end cameras, like let's say I had to do this the other day with some Chauvet DJ lights. So the house lights came in with truss, and they put up these Chauvets, and they were flickering like crazy. And the guy I was working with, he's like, "Oh, I couldn't get rid of it." And I was like, "I know how to get rid of it." So I went into the camera's settings and did clear scan, and I was able to just dial it in, just stepping, because it's not a hard stop. It's I can go in there and change it. So I would look at both. Which way is easier to attack this problem, the camera side or the lighting side?
Alex Lindsay.
Yeah, Mickey says that flicker free is considered at least 2,000 hertz. So that is a so that's when what you're looking for. Oftentimes with some of these lighting fixtures, I agree with Guy that you get a sample and put it in front of a camera and see how it goes. I would always try to solve it in the lights, because you don't know what cameras are like. If you're building architecture and you're putting something in permanently, you don't want everyone to have to fix their cameras, because you don't know what camera they're going to have. So you do want to go through the process of figuring out which ones work. By the way, the little trick with those Chauvet lights is that you usually see the flickering when people are turning them down. So a lot of times what we do is we keep them high and we filter them. So we put something to knock them down in front of them, so that what we don't do is turn them down, because what they're doing is the LED is going slower to give out less light. And so if you turn them all the way up, a lot of times they're going to stay. You won't see as much flicker or any flicker oftentimes. But you only see it as you start to try to make them darker.
Yeah, I never would go out on a shoot where there are going to be screens without 1, 2, and 4 stop neutral density that you could use instead of dimming, because too many problems too much of the time. Next question.
This one's from Nathan Cashin in Oregon City. What is your standard operating procedure for configuring a new Mac, even using Homebrew and Mac App Store? I lost an entire day getting everything installed and settings configured to my liking. I hesitate to rely on Migration Assistant. Is there a better way?
Alexander Knight?
Well, I agree with you. Migration Assistant, in my experience, is not being the best. And also, as far as this is concerned, you must have a lot, because if you're spending all day on it, I can see how that would be very frustrating. I would look at something like Apple's MDM, Mobile Device Manager. That is something that could greatly help you if you've got multiple devices. It's designed to help you manage multiple devices at scale, where you can push updates and configuration files to that computer. So MDM, I don't know of another solution other than Apple's MDM for Macs. So that's what I would look at.
Alex Lindsay.
I set everything up from scratch. I don't let anything run I don't do any kind of installs. I don't do any kind of build up or whatever. I put everything on one at a time and let it install, because it's checking a bunch of things in the library. It's never as stable. If you do anything other than just putting things on one at a time, it's never going to be as stable. Now, if you have a big fleet, then you need to do it that way, and you just put up with it. But generally, I will put things on. I have the list of things I need, or oftentimes I only put on what I need as I need it in a new computer. I don't add things just to add them.
And I'm on the opposite end of the thing. I use Migration Assistant, but only after I spend a week perfecting my system, which means I'm going to go in and I'm going to throw away all the old cruft. I'm going to do a lot of searching. I'm going to use Grand Perspective and other tools to make sure that all the old stuff that's obsolete has been consigned to the dustbin of history. And then once I have a clean, stable operating system, Migration Assistant has always worked really easily and simply, and I can go away and let it do its job. But getting rid of the cruft is the issue. If you just do it on the system and you haven't paid attention to it in 10 years, it'll be a disaster. Next question.
From the QR code, Marty Dickinson in Fairfield, Connecticut. What video equipment chain would you recommend with my audio podcast to do in studio and remote work, connected from a Soundcraft Si 16-channel expression with multi-digital card? I sent several questions yesterday with detailed equipment. I am a Mac gal. Thanks. Alex
Lindsay.
Hi, Marty. So good to have you. I think this might be your first question on the show, so I'm glad we got it in before the end of the hour. What you want to do is let us know what you have for the sound is not as important to us if we're doing video chain, because that'll be done right at the very last minute. So, but what is important is, what is your budget? Like, what do you want to do? Are you trying to? So you have an audio podcast. Question is will you ever have somebody there with you? Do you need multiple cameras, or are you just doing a single camera? What do you want to spend on it? You can start to spend a couple $100 on a webcam. So I would say under $200. I would say that my choice would always be the Link 360, the Link 1, not the Link 2. I'm not a fan of the Link 2. But the Link 1, the Link 360 is probably the best under $200 that you're going to get. You can find some used or less expensive cameras under $500. The film cameras, the camera, and the Canon, is it C50, R50, D50, D50, 50D, something like that. Some people use. When you get up into the $700 or $800 range, there's a variety of Sony cameras, including the ZV-E1 ZV-10, that one. That's at $800. Number two, a lot of the naming for both Canon and Sony obviously make very confusing
Alphabet
for me.
soup.
So that gets you into the kind of the $800 range, and that's going to look a lot better. I mean, the autofocus is going to make a difference. It's going to be a shorter depth of field. Super 35 starts to make a big difference here. I'm using a Sony FX30, which is still a super 35 sensor or APS sensor, and that's about $1,800 for the camera. And then above that, you start to get into the FX3s, which are going to start to get you into the full frame sensors. There's also in that $2,000 range the Blackmagic cameras. You're going to give up if you're a single person, like working by yourself, and you are need to do focus. That's why most of us use Sonys, is because that autofocus becomes really important because someone else isn't there to do it for us. So that's the kind of thing to think about. Now, as far as after you figure out what camera, if you're doing web cameras, then you're going to put them straight into your computer. If you have HDMI out of some of the larger cameras, you now have the ability to get a switcher. Of course, you can get the basic ATEM Mini is going to give you the inputs that you need to have a couple cameras and potentially a computer. You can see oftentimes I'm, cutting to another input. And so you can decide, whether you have a couple inputs there. Most of us end up growing to a Mini Extreme because we want more inputs and more I/O and more things that we can put. But a basic Mini at $300 is a pretty great deal. To kind of like interface that. It's nice just to also be able to put up a still. Like my wife doesn't really do a lot of cutting back and forth, but she's got an ATEM Mini where it's just a still so that she can pop a still in when she's not there and then come back, not of her, but of just something that says I'm not here. And that's a nice additive. So those are some ideas. Think about what your, let us know what your budget is and the kind of things that you want to do with that video pipeline, and we can probably be more accurate.
Marty popped into the question, said, I'm a professional photographer and have a full line of Canon. I have a robust budget. So, Marty, come back, ask more questions. You want to place...
Have you heard of this? There's a camera company called Arri. And,
watch out. Warning.
Let me tell you how great you would look with an LF. Robust budget. All right, Marty. All right. So we'll ask that question again and we'll dig in deeper now that we have more context.
Have some fun with this. It's time for us to say thank you. And I'm going to flip it around. I'm going to thank the back-end crew first because I don't usually do that. And those of you who are watching the show have no idea how important the quiet, unsung heroes all over the world who are in the back technically for this show are. They are legion. They are incredibly talented. They do more tasks than you could ever imagine. And without them, this show would not be what it is. So to our back-end crew, thank you. For the producers, those of you who ask questions every day and drive the show with that, thank you. It includes all of our panelists today and, of course, everybody who's been a part of this show for a long time. And certainly, not least, if last in this case, are our producers. That's those of you who ask the questions that drive our show. We thank you for contributing your thoughts and helping us kind of have a structure for this. And for those of you who vote on the questions through our Makana system and percolate up to the top the things that you find are the most important. Those are the things we spend the most time on and get into most depth in. So you're voting if you have gone to officehours.join or ask office hours, or not ask office, just officehours.global/join. That is the link to get in, and you will get the email and you can become part of the Mukana community in the back end. Thank you for watching. And the Talk Traversal today, we would have had to travel 34,000 miles to go talk to everybody who asked a question here and have the discussion that we had virtually. That's 54,000 kilometers and 268 million bananas for scale. We'll see you tomorrow.
Really liking our little screen with our infographic screen.
It works. It's bold now, and I can read it much more easily out of the small box. Nicely done.
Robust budget for cameras.
Yeah,
robust.
Never come in here saying I've got
robust.
I love the word robust budget. Those two words are some of my favorite words in the whole world.
I went into somebody's first class podcast studio. They just moved it out of their house into this warehouse that they're renting, and all Sony FX6s. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's definitely.
Well,
have you heard of Ingenue? How about Primo?
Zeiss. Get all sorts of Zeiss primes.
I mean, if you're really building your robust budget, then FR7s are the at home by yourself. FR7s are the thing that I would pick over almost everything else.
I would love that. That would be such a flex. Somebody just walks into my house and I've got the big joystick and I'm controlling.
There was a campaign that I think had, I want to say 30 FR7s